basics of the Mishnah and the Gemara, and then we'll get into some of the kashas. So, Ezu mamzer. What defines as a mamzer? Now, obviously, we know that the halacha is that a mamzer, any child that comes from a mamzer, is a mamzer, and atziv kol adoros. So, a child. So, it's not talking about what all of the cases of what's a mamzer, but rather what begins the process, what would define something as a process of a mamzer. So, the Armish says kol she'er basar. Anything that is she'er basar, that means that it is a relative, shehu b'lo yavoi, that on account of it being a relative, on account of the she'eris, there is a lav. B'lo yavoi, different Rabbi Kiva, that's Rabbi Kiva. So Rashi says, kol kurva she b'lav, any kurva that's a lav, any relative that has a iser lav, even if it doesn't have kores, and that's coming lafuke the next shita, which is Shimon Atamani, who says that there is that it requires that the iser is a iser kores. He said no. The Rabbi Kiva's opinion is that it doesn't require an iser kores. However, it does require that it is an iser she'er. It has the basis of the iser is she'er. That's our Mishnah, according to Rashi. Umachmas kurva, the third line Rashi. Umachmas kurva, and it has to be that it comes on midin kurva. If it's just a lav, right, as the Gemara is going to give examples, Rashi is going to give examples. If it's just a lav, that's not enough. It has to be that the iser that we have is an iser kurva as well, is the basis for the iser. Different Rabbi Kiva. Anything that is chayav kares, and the Mishnah throws in halachic dvarav. Yeah, and Tosis is bothered by that. We don't usually have such a thing that we're going to learn the halacha that way. Nevertheless, that is taka the halacha that it's b'chayv krisa. So this is the second shita in the Gemara, and that is the halacha that the only time that you have a iser, a mamzerus, is when it comes to chayv krisas. Third shita, Rabbi Shua, Aimer kol shechayav of misas beistin. Rabbi Shua says no, it has to have it in misas beistin. So the Mishnah concludes that Rabbi Shimon ben Azai. By the way, just this Rabbi Shimon ben Azai is a neither question. The Gemara usually calls him ben Azai because he never married. He married one. He was married for one day, and let's see. He it's a shaila. Did he have smicha? And they took away his title on account of that he never married, or that they never gave him smicha to begin with. The girsa we have of Rabbi Shimon ben Azai would say that he had smicha, and they ask on that. Obviously, it's not the yesod of the Gemara here, but it is an interesting point in this mission. Rabbi Shimon ben Azai matzas Megillas Yuchsa b'Yerushalayim found a sefer Yuchsa in Yerushalayim, which would be a raya, because the Megillas Yuchsin was a basis for halacha. Because about ish played a mamzer ish ish, that this person was a mamzer, and it said, and it specified that it came from a ish ish l'chaim divrei Rabbi Yeshua, which proves Rabbi Yeshua because it has to be that it was a misas based in. Now the Mishnah goes back ish shemesa muta b'choisa, that there's no basically the next a few cases in the Gemara just. The next few cases in the Gemara. Okay. So the Gemara, the Mishnah is going to give various cases, which tells us that the iser of Eishes Achos Isha, a person's wife's sister, is only b'chayim, only while he's alive. Okay, so let's go to the Gemara. My time at Rabbi Kiva. What's the basis for Rabbi Kiva? The chsiv lo yikach ish es Eishes Aviv. It says one may not marry layikach, so you can't marry the father's wife. And then it says leigala knaf aviv, do not uncover the garment of the father, meaning that this is adding something knaf shara aviv leigala. And what is that adding? That is anusas aviv, where it was without marriage. It was anusas aviv, meaning that it was forced, but it doesn't mean dafka anusa. It can be any form of any form of eshes of anything that's without kiddushin, without marriage. And it says, the Rabbi Yehuda says that means anus stuff. If someone like Rabbi Yehuda anus stuff, the havala chai belavin, the samach le'lev mamzer b'kal Hashem, and afterwards it says le'lev mamzer. So alma havala mamzer, and we have this brisa. Now over there, it doesn't specifically say knaf. It doesn't specifically say that it is a she'er, a lav the she'er. Just simply it says that it's a lav. And we have the brisa of Abaya, Akalmodim. So Rashi says that there's a machloikis of whether Rabbi Akiva requires a lav the she'er or not. Does it require that there is that this person is a relative, that the basis of the erva is the she'er, the marriage, that's the basis for it, or not? In the Mishnah, our Mishnah says, kol she'er basa. And the requirement is that it is a she'er, that there is a erva based upon the marriage. Rashi gives kagoyin, noisach halutzasa, the havabele yivne, the havabele kurva, lav the kurva b'le kares. Rashi makes things complicated. It would have been very nice and easy if Rashi had left out Yevomos from this Mishnah. If Rashi would have just said, yeah, anything that's a relative, for instance, like the Gemara says later, that it is a lav of leigala knaf of it, right? The wife of his father, and without marriage, is going to be an isser to him. And that's a she'er de korba. That's a shared a lav of she'er, a lav of, and that's the Gemara's case. But Rashi throws in, or kagoyin chalutza. So he did chalitza on this woman. So he did chalitza. Now why is she asatin? Why is she asatin? So you may think, well, it's the brother's wife without a mitzvah. Right? It's the brother's wife without a mitzvah. But Mela, it's awesome because eshesach. But the Gemara says no. The Gemara has a special limud. The Gemara says, since it says asher lebana beisachiv, because he did not rebuild his brother's house. Asher lebana shuv lo yivne. He didn't. He can no longer do this. So there's a drasha of a lav de lo yivne. Asher, because it says asher lo yivne as beisach. It doesn't say asher lebana, who didn't, but lo yivne will not. Lo yivne tells you that there's a lav of lo yivne. We saw this in Gemara earlier. So there's a lav of lo yivne. Now, the Ramban holds that the lav of lo yivne is a separate lav. The Ramban in the counting of the lavin in the Torah has a lav of lo yivne. It's a separate lav. So what's the basis of that lav? That's not because of a relationship. Fakir. It's a lav because of lack of relationship. What's the reason that this Yavam is not allowed to marry this woman? Not because he had a she'er, but because he didn't have she'er, because he didn't marry her, because he didn't have a relationship with her. So why is it a lav the kurva of she'er?
Stemming from the Isser comes from the his father. It's not because she's related to him.
Great. So
here, the Isser's coming from some other source, but the Isser is hinged on the fact that she was related, that she's coming from his brother. The starting point has to be that she was related to him.
You're saying Tosas Shita. So Rabbi Yossi is saying, well, how are you going to define a lav d'she'er? What's the definition of a lav d'she'er? An isser marriage, an isser in Havaya. You're not allowed to marry this person on account of what? On account of a relationship. So normally it would be like, okay, it's my wife's sister, right? So that would be a lav d'she'er on account of my relation. Therefore, this person is usher. So that makes sense. That's a lav d'she'er. But then we'd have the next brisa is not sufficient because you don't have a lav d'she'er. So Rashi said in Hanami that it's a machlokes. They're going to hold that Rabbi Akiva holds that there's no lav d'she'er that in the brisa. But Tosfos says no. It has to be that Rabbi Akiva always holds that you need a lav d'she'er, like our Mishnah says it, and the brisa is not cholik on our Mishnah. So Tosfos says, you know what the definition of lav d'she'er is? Lav d'she'er is that there's any relationship that's the basis for the machlokes. No, sorry, for the isser. It doesn't have to be that a marriage is the relation, is the isser, but it comes from something that had an isser. So that's what you're saying. It's the fact that the brother was married to this woman created a mitzvah yibum, and the chalitza undid that, and now there's a layivna. So that's the basis for it, right? That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm just not hearing the other side.
But Rashi doesn't hold that. Rashi doesn't hold that because Rashi later says that the brisa is going to be a stira to our Mishnah, and the brisa does not hold you need lav d'she'er. So Rashi holds that you need a lav d'she'er, an actual lav of you need an actual the lav is coming from an actual relationship. So the kash is so what is the lav d'she'er over here? Rashi throws in kagoin noisech chalitza. So he married the woman that he gave chalitza to, which is asa to him. The hava b'layivne, which is the isser of layivne. V'hava lav the kurva b'leikar. So it's a relationship isser. It's really a lack of relationship isser. Okay. Right. That's what Tosfos is cholik, right? So Rashi is saying that not. Perfect, right? That is the kasha we're asking, right? If he remarried the woman that he's not allowed to remarry, who was once his wife, and because he divorced her, he may no longer remarry her. That's not a lav on account of relationship. It's a lav on account of lack of relationship. So it doesn't count as a share. And chalitza is different. So that's the basic kasha. Zogma.
It's called a korva because she somehow goes back to Eishazachin, based on Eishazachin.
Correct. So we're gonna have to get to this thing, and they say it in different ways. No, it isn't. If you want, there are chairs if you'd like.
I'm just here for
A few minutes. You're allowed to sit those few minutes. Yes. All right. So, how can it be? You're asking the same question, but in a different way. How can it be that his divorcee wife is prohibited to him on account of a non-marriage, but his brother's wife that he did chalitza to and is separated, that's going to be more of an issa because of relationship, right? You're asking it in another angle, but the same thing.
No, the reason why the solution is different is because she used to be the race of the Rashi didn't accept the
Okay, so let's look. I'm going to say it over the way Rabbi Baruch said it.
That is the law. I mean, it's just it's a derisa. We're talking right now about Yisrael law. So the law itself is chalitza. That has to be what Rashi talking about. You can't say, since Lamaisa it's hinged on an Isser Daraisa of Eishes Ach, so we should find her an Eishes Ach. You have to call her a Chalutza because that's the law that we're discussing right now.
Great. So the way Rabbi Yossi is asking is another angle. Okay, so we're all coming at the same question. He's asking a different angle. If we said that, like the Ramban says, there's a new Isser Torah, a new lav that says that you may not remarry lo yivne, and they may not remarry your chalutza. So that's a separate lav, and that's what the Rashi is mentioning. So you can't tell me it's contingent on some previous lav. It's a new lav. It's a separate lav mentioned in the count of lavin in the Torah. It's a new lav. No, but it can't be on the basis. It's not.
You could, because it's still only an issue because they're related.
No, it's because they're no longer related. See, Rashi, according to Tosfos, you can say that, not according to Rashi. Can't. But that's not the way Rashi looks. But
even according to the Ramban, you could still.
No, I'm saying in Rashi. So the Lamaisa, I left out a piece of information. The Rambam actually does not. Count it in the lavin. So the Rambam, we're going to say maybe holds that it's not a separate lav. So the way Rabbi Baruch says this, the Achronim have different ways of expressing the answer to how to understand Rashi. But he shows us a Rashi on Nun Amud Beis. On Nun Amud Beis, the Rashi is dealing with the Isser of a Yavam who did Yibum on one wife of the deceased brother, and then went ahead and did Yibum with the second wife of the brother. And the Gemara says that what's the Issa doing a Yibum a second time? Right? After all, we say that when the brother passed, his marriages pass on to the surviving brother. Right? That's what the Zika is. And even though that he's supposed to do Yibum to one, but he did to two. So what's the Isser on that? So the Gemara brings a limit in the pasuk. The pasuk says, "Bayis echad ashabana beis achiv." He builds the brother's house, single house. Bayis echad u'bayna ve'ena bayna shnei batim. So the Gemara learns from the Torah a prohibition from the positive mitzvah of Bayis echad u'bayna, that there's a lav haba mechlala say, a lav that comes from that you should not be buying another one. And to that Rashi says, that he's going to have the Issa Eshesach. That he's going to have on that an Isser of Eshesach. Eight lines from the bottom. VE. VE is the last word on the line. The first word is bi'acha maimer. The last words of Rashi. Ukapaga be'isa eshesach. And if he does, right? That means he's going to marry one Yevama and then the next Yevama. Ukapaga be'isa eshesach. And he will then encounter Issa Eshesach. So the Beis Meir in Shulchan Aruch says, I don't understand. The Gemara tells us a separate Isser. The Gemara says that it's an Isser because Kivin Shabana Shuv Le'yivne. Once he's already established the household of one brother, he doesn't have another Isser. So why does he say the Kapaga Be'eshesach? That Isser is not there anymore. And the way Rabbi Baruch explains the question of the Beis Meir is like this. There's a sheet. There's a Rashba earlier in the Masechta, and this Rashba comes up many times in the other Rishonim, bringing this in as a point. The Rashba says once the Isser Eshes Ach falls away because of mitzvahs yibum and never comes back. It can never come back on account of derechah darchino. The ways of Torah are pleasant. It can't be that the Torah prohibited this woman because it's his brother's wife, then said you have a mitzvah to marry this woman, meaning that previous isser is gone. Oh, and for some reason the mitzvah goes away. Now that our previous issa comes back. It's too many reversals. So the Rashba holds, he brings rayas. We're not going to go into the Rashba now, but the Rashba holds once the issa eshes achas paka, and this is the way in the yeshivas they call it, the pekia. Once there was a paka, that the isser eshes ach, the brother's wife's as a relative prohibition, a prohibition of a relative, paka disappeared, it never comes back. So the way the Beis Meir's question on that Rashi is like, so what do you mean? This woman was his Yevomos, meaning the Isser of Eshes Ach is gone. So you can't tell me that there's the previous Isser comes back just because he did Yibum to one of the wives of the deceased brother. Now when he does Yibum to the second, it's his brother. It's an erva of Eshes Ach. No, that's already gone. That's the way the Beis Meir asked the question. The Rebbe Baruch explains, but that's the way the Beis Meir's question would be here on Rashi. And from the fact that Rashi says that it is an Issa Eshes Ach, so he learns that the definition of Rashi in the Beis Meir explains in Rashi. He says a very interesting thing. When the Torah said that a deceased brother's marriage passes over to a yavam, so what's taich? What does that mean? It means that the isser of Eshes Ach is suspended, right? We talked about whether it's hutra, duchuya. I don't want to get into that. It's suspended or superseded. However you're going to say that, but the point is now there's a mitzvah. Then that mitzvah disappears. Okay, in this case, there were two wives. One he did yibum to, so now the other one, the mitzvah disappeared. It never goes back to a kares. That's for sure, because the Gemara says from the fact that the Torah said a lav, the Torah says, you can only marry one, establish one household, and you can't establish two households for the deceased brother. For the Batim tells us that there's an isser lav. That means it's not kares. The original severity of the lav is no longer there, but the lav stays the same. So the way the Beis Meir says it is, it's the lav of Eshes Ach. It's the original lav of Eshes Ach. It's your brother's wife. You're not allowed to marry this woman. However, the severity is removed on account of the mitzvah, and now the Torah puts it into a simple lav of you can only marry, you can only reestablish your brother's household once, not twice. And therefore you cannot marry her. But the lav that the Gemara makes is still based on the original lav of Eshes Ach. It simply dilutes it from a kares to a lav. And the same we're going to have to say over here in Leyivne. The Leyivne is not a new lav. It's a redefinition of the old lav. The lav of the brother of the Torah was, you can't marry your brother's wife. Then the Torah said, no, in this case, you must. You did chalitza, you may no longer. But you may no longer, and the original lav is still in place. The which lav? Of Eshes Ach. It's your brother's wife. So that's a she'er de kurva. It's your brother's wife. But it's only a lav and not kares because of liyivne. That's the way Rabbi Baruch says. In the yeshivas they say various versions of this idea, but this is the concept that the original lav is still in place. Which lav? The lav de she'er, the lav on account of marriage. It's your brother's wife, so that marriage is the source of the isser to you. However, normally you would say that's a kares. Normally it is a kares. After chalitza, it's diluted down to a lav. And now let's look at Rashi again, because we have to understand which point was Rashi addressing. Was Rashi addressing the the she'er part, or was Rashi addressing the lack of kares part? The whole kurvashi belav, afile aim by kares, any lav, even if it doesn't have kares, like anusas aviv, so his father's wife without marriage, ukurab Yehuda, the havale belav, the legal kanaf aviv, umachmas kurva, and it's on account of relation, right? Kugoyim noisech halutzase, the have belay yivne, the have a lav the kurva shel kares, that there's a lav of layivne, which is a lav of kurva without kares. Is he addressing the kurva part? No, layivne is not a kurva part. Layivne is a lack of kurva part, according to Rashi. He's addressing, it must be, we're going to have to say, according to this, he's addressing the last line, the last two words. Bekares. Shalei bekares, right? Belay kares. That part. Even though that it is an Eshesach, layivne tells me it's without kares. Just as we have in Nunam base, just as we have the base mayor says that and as Rashi clearly says that if he already did yibum on one of the widows, the other one is going to be a isser a lav. But even though it's clear in the Gemara, it's a lav, not kares, but it's a lav without kares of eshesach. So it's a new thing, right? We always know eshesach, a brother's wife, is a kares. The Torah removed it. There's new lamed. Rashi says over there, no, it's a karesless eshesach. We have a new eshesach, a karesless eshesach, and that's the way we're going to have to define the Rashi here of lav the kurva of layivne is also it's only on the aspect of a lack of kares. So what is the iser? It's not because you already did chalitza, so you're not allowed to remarry her. That's not the iser, because that should be the same as gerushin. You divorced her, so you're not allowed to remarry her. That divorcing is a lack of relationship, not because of relationship. And according to Rashi, that would not be a lav de she'er. So therefore, we have to say that it's not. This is worse. By a regular marriage, a divorcee, it's a lack of marriage. There never was any isser on this woman. There's only one isser. Now that she was divorced and was married to someone else, so you can't take her back. Okay, so that's a lack of marriage, a lack of relationship that creates that isser. Over here, once you do chalitza, it reignites the original isser. Not like the Rashba that says paka, it's gone. Rashi, and there's Rebbe shows a dozen Rashis throughout Yevomos, he does not hold of this Rashba of paka. He does not hold that once the Issa Eshesach is gone, it doesn't come back, including this Rashi right here, right? Including this Rashi right here on Nunam at base, which says that Rashi says that even though that there clearly was a mitzvah yibum, so the Eshesach is gone, and then Rashi says if you do yibum on one, the other one is going to be a poga, you're going to meet, meaning it's going to be an occurrence of Eshesach. According to Rashi, it can't be. Eshesach is gone. So Rashi doesn't hold of that idea of pakad, that once the Eshesach is gone, it's gone forever. No, the Eshesach is still there hovering over. Mitzvah says it's there. The mitzvah goes away because you did chalitza. The Eshesach comes back, but not in kares. Lo Yivne tells me it comes back as a lav. Why? Because why did the Torah have to tell me a lav if it comes back as a kares? The fact that the Torah tells me a lav is not to create a lav, the way the Ramban and Rashba will hold, because the Ramban counts it as a new lav. That means the lav is going from zero into lav. Rashi learns the other way around. Really, it reverts back to a kares. And the Torah saying lo yivne brings it down from a kares to a lav. But it's the original isser. So that's why it's not a new lav, and the Rambam doesn't count it in the minyan mitzvahs or the minyan lavin as a separate lav, because it's not a separate lav. It's the same lav that was there beforehand. It's just diluted. It's downgraded from kares to lav. So that's why in our Mishnah, Rashi has a lav de she'er, that the leyivne is a lav de she'er. It's a it's a lav of kurva, but it's not a kares.
According to that, why after it's done, are we allowed to get married to the law?
Sorry.
If someone is usually, why are you allowed to get married to the Yevamot if there's a law?
Well, that the Gemara asks, right? We saw that earlier. Tesis was a Chavtes. Tesis talks about that. The idea is that that's the derech ha'adachinoi. Torah would never say marry someone, right? Where the next day it's us. That's the derech ha'adachinoi, right? That's the Tesis of. Unless you makayim the mitzvah, then it went away. The mitzvah takes it away, and you makayim the mitzvah. The Rashba wants to extend that to even when you were not makayim the mitzvah. That part, he says, good job. Glad it's not hot. Okay. So the Gemara says, this is also Negeya, another machlekes that comes up. Rabbi Kiva has several chuvas, a very sad case where somebody misunderstood the mitzvah yibum and thought that her husband passed away. She had a child, but the child died prior to the husband passing away, which means that the husband died childless. And so she thought there's no mitzvah yibum. There's no mitzvah yibum because she had a child. Even though the child predeceased her husband, and she went and remarried. And then she found out, that she was a Yevama. And she was a Yevama that married someone else. And there was a lav. There's a lav on this Yevama of L'siyeh Shamesa Chutza, L'Ish Zar. And it's a question of whether by mistake, whether it creates mamzerus and so on. And
She had kids?
and they had a kid. And the question of whether or not that marriage is even kiddushin types or not, and it's based on this question over here as well of whether or not there's kiddushin types in Yevama is on whether Leivin is a separate lavra kivega is kiddushin types in. So let's step back for a second. Let's step back for let's see it. Let's step back. So what's the basis? So we're getting into what? That's the machlekes Rabbi Shmuel. That's right. So really we get into the basis of mamzerus. Do we say it's anything that there's no kiddushin on? It's my fault. Is it anything that doesn't have kiddushin, l'sihiyah, and or do we say that it is a totally in chorus as well? And that's what I want to touch here. So the Gemara. Abaye says everybody moide balanida, even though that's a lav of karis. Vala soita shein of lad mamze. Nida that talks about kiddushin. She never seen he does love. So since kiddushin is types in on her, even though she's tamid nida, so memela the kiddush the it's not going to be a lav. It's not going to be a mamze. Soita the anami talks about kiddushin. Tani no melcha kamoide balanida vala soita vala shemeres yavam shein of lad mamze. She's a shemeres yavam, then ein avlad mamze, right? This is this case. V'abaye shemeres yavam mesapkali ikaravi kishmu. Abaye, he didn't mention what? He didn't mention Shemeres Yavim in his count. Why didn't he mention Shemeres Yavim? Because he's mesupik whether like Rav or Shmuel in this machlokes of whether or not Rav says later in Daf Tzadi Beis that kedushin and aptayv sin in Yevamot because it says le'sia yisrael meisachutza leish zar le'tia lesbe'avaya. There is no creation of kedushin. The Torah throughout Chazal, the creation of marriage, the efficacy of a marriage is called havaya. Creating that oneness. And Shmuel says, well, I'm not so sure about that. So it's really Shmuel is mesupik. Okay, so we get into what's taka the reason that even though there's a kares, nevertheless kiddushin is tayfsin, or even though there's a kares, there's no iser. Even though there's a kares, there's no mamzeres. So Tosfos over here says an interesting thing. He learns from even though there's an iser, we find other lavin that there's an iser and nevertheless it's not going to create a mamzeres. For instance, Eved v'akum abal bas Yisrael, an akum that marries a Jew, right? So that child is not a mamzer. So Tosfos says, what's the reason? The time Amar Rabbeinu Tam the Havakei v'Kochavim Eved she'ein ba kiddushin l'shum adam u'liyavam nami lavas kiddushin he. Also, kiddushin doesn't take effect for yom. So Tosfos says this idea that when do you say that there's a lav that would create mamzeres? That's when the lav is to this particular person or this group of people. So this person or these type of people are prohibited to this woman, and everybody else is permitted. That tells you that there's no kiddushin to that person. And since that person cannot marry, the kiddushin is not teifus in this person, so memela, that tells you that that's a particularly non-marriageable relationship, and that creates mamzeres. But if there's no kiddushin to anybody, that doesn't tell you that there's a particular problem in this marriage. It just says kiddushin is not chal for this person. That's not a chalois in marriage. Same with nida. What's the isser over there? It's kares, but it's not kares to a particular person. Or the person's tummy, the woman's tummy, and so that's an isser to everybody. So then it's not a lav that particularly to a different person. So even if you're not going to say that you need a lav de she'er, like Rabbi Kiva says, but what's the concept? Why would you need a lav de she'er, a lav on account of the relationship? It means this is uniquely usher. This is a uniquely usher marriage. That it's not the word that, well, they're not allowed to get married, so the child's a mamzer. No, it's they are not allowed to get married. That makes a mamzer. But if kiddushin is not teifus, because kiddushin is not teifus, they're not in that mitzvah. It's not teifus to anybody, like an akum, right? He's just not in the mitzvah of kiddushin. So then it's not going to be a lav that's going to create mamzeres because it's not particularly. This is not a particularly usher union. It's not a particularly usher marriage. It's usher to everybody. The same would be with a yavam. Now here Tosfos stretches. No, because it's one person, it's mutter. Oh, so Tosfos says over here, Tosfos takes us to hold on to your seat. So don't jump out because you're going to want to jump and just scream. Tosfos says, hey, the yavam also is also. This is Tosfos on Amud Beis. 5 lines in, 8 lines in. The Yevoma can't have Kiddushin to anybody. Nobody. Even the Yavam. If he takes a ring and says, Hare at Mekudesh Asli, you know what happens? Nothing. How about Kiddushin? Well, Medoraisa, it's nothing. Chazal said, well, Maimer, now it blocks out any of the other brothers, but if there's no other brother, nothing happened. Right? It doesn't do anything. The only one way of doing Yibum, it's doing Yibum, it's consummating the taking over the brother's marriage. But she is a lav bas kiddushin to anybody, to the one in the street and to the other. So therefore, it's not a kiddushin. Now the Achronim ask, I don't know what you're talking about, Tesis. And there are many questions on Tesis. But the articulation of this kasha is this one way. There are 2 separate lavin. There are 2 separate no kiddushins. The reason that ish zar, somebody not a yavam, can't marry this woman, is because the Torah says that she's not allowed to marry anybody else. What's the reason the yavam can't do kiddushin? Because the Torah says, no. That lav doesn't apply to one person or all the brothers. But at least one person. It doesn't apply to him. So that lav should be a particular lav to everybody but one person. So that means that it's a particular lav. Like you said, Eshes Ach. Zara Eshes Ish. So to Loisili Ishzar, it's unique. It's unique because it's an issa to everyone but to this one person. That's what they ask on Tesis. So it's not the same love. You're right that everybody's not allowed to marry this woman, including the Yavam. But the Yavam is a different issa than that. It's 2 separate isurim. What?
It's not allowed at all.
Right, it's not allowed. But you're one way to say it, the Yavam has no lav. The other way to say it is the lav that it asers everyone else doesn't apply to him.
Is the lack of thesis fusion, the fact that she has no thesis fusion to anyone, is that a semen or a siba? That she's cruising on him. When you say it's a siba, and the fact that well, nice she's fusion to no one, but not for us. You know what the reason for that? Since she has fusion to no one in the world.
Now, the way Tosfos explained it is not the siba. Tosfos explained it as the definition of a lav. The lav is particular versus the lav is general.
It has to be the lav itself.
That's the way Tosfos says it. She'ein ba kiddushin l'shem adam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The lashon is vague. I mean, it could be. Is it shot that there has to be a lav that asks her from all people, or just that any woman who lacks fusion to any person in the world?
It just happens 7 different reasons. This one because of this. This one because of this. This one because of that.
Let's say a woman takes a shvur or neder. She won't marry any man in the world. So then she marries the guy. So that comes to this mamzer.
The Kedusha will be Teifus because Kedusha is Teifus. But let's say there's 7 different Isurim to people in the world, right? To this one, it's also because this. And this one, it's also because of that. I don't know. It's a Anyhow, it's those that say that how could Cain and Hevel, who did they marry? Right, they married their sisters. I could marry sisters also, right? So one is that there was no Satari yet, right? But when you want to say Drush on with Halacha, so they say that because Kiddushin it doesn't create a they asked him, fine, there was but it creates a mamzer. So no, it doesn't create a mamzer because it was us to everybody. Because I was never right. Yeah. the only other person, right?
It's that lav, not that.
Anyhow, we're well beyond. So just this kasha tesis. You have to see what is tesis saying. Tesis may be dama two things that are not the same. They're not the same.
The test is saying that it's like she's married and then even the act is still bad, so it's only because he's taking over. But then she still shouldn't be better than a regular.
Yeah. She's up right.
Even if you say that
No,
that's fewer than
but by him he has to be gomer. By Ishtis, there's no.
no, so Yavam could be better than, but he doesn't have. The reason why there's no kedushin is because she's still in
You say as much as Zika is the previous brother's marriage, so then there's the previous brother's marriage. That's what you're saying.
right, but it still shouldn't help because it shouldn't be better than regular.
That's right.